And I can remember my teacher, right, seeing me and taking me to the circus. Like, we didn't go to the circus in foster care, right? Like, who does that? But I did. And so that was like a significant relationship to me was this teacher, Mrs. Mathewson, right? I think things along the way, people who have been able to stay the storm with me when others really can't, because when you have a lot of grief and you are not very good at expressing yourself, and I do struggle with ADHD, it's very hard, to really express. So people, for example, like this teacher who can see, look, because in the classroom, I was the kid who was like running around, right? Like not paying attention. And she can kind of see beyond that, and she can kind of see that I am this child and that I need to be comforted, or maybe just something, so I'm something beyond a diagnosis and something beyond a behavior.
Welcome back to Finding Common Ground with Steve Gagne, and Heather's off on this particular one. We're doing things a little differently today because this is a sensitive type subject that people from the outside can look at and review, but also I think it's more genuine when you have people from the inside, so to speak, that have lived experiences within the foster care systems. And that's what this topic is about today. I'd like to introduce our audience to Beth LaFontaine. And Beth, just to open it right up, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe how we met.
Yes, thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it and helping to amplify my voice and my experience. I'm definitely excited to be here. I am Beth LaFontaine. I'm the CEO and founder of Anchor Phoenix. I am a former foster youth. And I met Steve after listening to this podcast and hearing Rachel, his daughter, speak. And it really, listening to her lived experience really caught my attention because it was a really unique perspective as well that I think really needs to be heard, and a lot of our voices coming forward to be heard about what it's been like to be in the foster care system, but not just to live it, to support it, to be in the system. So, and then it really inspired me. So I just reached out to Steve, and he's like, hey, because I think you're about just as passionate as I am about foster care. And, I just think our energy since we've met has been great.
Yeah.
We've already accomplished some things, and we've got some plans in the works. And so it's been awesome.
I look forward to all of that. It's just a side note on the LinkedIn. A year ago, I wasn't even on it. I wasn't looking for a job, but people told me, you know what, you're going to find people on there that you could possibly connect with that can really help you move the needle, Steve. And I got on it, and I'm thrilled because my passion is foster care. It's everybody knows me in the autism and disability worlds, but we're foster parents. We're therapeutic foster parents, my wife and I, and we've done it for quite a long time. We have quite a bit of experience with it. And so when you go on something like LinkedIn, I didn't expect to find anybody really with that's in this kind of a world, foster care world. And it's just the opposite. I found quite a few people that are involved in it in one way or another. You were one of them. So I can remember, when we first talked, I said, boy, I really have to talk to Beth. So I was wondering go ahead.
I love how you brought up LinkedIn because I think you and I spoke about our trajectories and where we're at and our advocacy and our passion. And LinkedIn is a place that, has always been like the professional playground. I don't know how else you would say it, or where and as far as lived experience or how we met, I never really used to share my personal experiences, or kind of call it outing myself. So one of the things that I really appreciate is that I have seen more people acknowledging, right? Like, I have been in the foster care system, or this is who I am. And so for me, that is a part of my identity. And I do appreciate that I can be, the voice from within, from having lived. And then also, my professional experience and what I can kind of bring to that mix. And I think like in our conversations, I really see that with you as well, which has been phenomenal already.
Yeah, we certainly have clicked on this subject, and I think we, when you, this is a tough subject because the foster care system, in my opinion, is extremely filled with. I'm trying to think of the right word. It's got many issues in it. It's got systemic failures in it. It's got systemic issues in it, and unfortunately, I think to the common person out there, and it's happened to me, people think just everything's la di da and okay in the foster care world. And it's just the opposite because we are the ones that see what's really going on, whether you having lived it or us being on the other end of it, having to bring children into
You
our
live it.
home. Right.
Yeah, you live it too. That's what Rachel was talking about. Rachel's living it. I mean, when was the last time we heard, a child who was like, hey, my parents are foster parents, right? But I'm living this. I went from being the baby of the family, which is a significant role, to now I'm the oldest and I'm in this different role. And, so that duality. So I think it's a really important lens, and if I think about the one word, if we could think of one word, and I know it's because there's many more than one words, but grief, I think
Right.
there's so much grief. I know that is one thing that really has impacted me over the years was just this grief. I think my work from working with folks, I'm a trained therapist and I've worked, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, has been focused on grieving. And it could be grieving from that individual level, but also grieving from that caregiver role. In my role for caring people over the years and the different hats that I've worn outside of lived experience, I've had grief too for the things that I couldn't change, for the things that I've seen. So grief really, I think, is one word that if we started there, would unite this conversation about what it's really like and that impact.
Yeah, unfortunately, what we have seen over the years is that so many times the foster child has no say in any of this, has no voice. They're not being heard, and shouldn't be that way. And unfortunately, what happens is so many of the adults in the room want to be the voice for them, and many times it's just not the best interest of the child. The child sometimes hasn't even been asked if that's what they even want in some of these situations. And what we've found is over the years when we listen to them, because we do, and they tell us completely different than what they may have said to a care manager, a case aide. It might be something, and they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to talk. They're afraid to get their feelings out there. And most of it's because they don't trust anybody. We've seen kids lied to in this. And we've discussed this briefly before, Beth, that we had a child here we actually just adopted who was told he was going back home in 3 days. I was in the room. A case manager told him that from the foster care agency, and this kid will never forget that lie. And in order to undo that, we have to make sure this kid trusts us because he didn't for a while. Because there's somebody else might lie to me. I didn't go home in 3 days, and here's 5 years later, and those kinds of things happen. I wanted to mention something that's important to me, and so why I'm so glad you're on here because the foster care stories need to be told. And they
Mm,
need to be told
mhm.
for specific reasons. You and I can talk about it, and you have even a better advantage because you've lived it on your end. And I would love to be able to do some things with you down the road where we can share getting some of these aged out foster kids' voices heard, and so that we can try and change these systemic failures in the system. Do you have any stories along the way that because in order for you to get from where you were from A to Z, where you've gotten because you were a former foster kid, all the way to where you are a professional now and owning a business, is there stories? I mean, of support and resiliency and care that help you get there?
Oh, absolutely. I know that, yes, we started this conversation saying the grief because it is just, it's for everyone, honestly. It's so hard to watch, witness, participate, and there's policies and all that. But I think as far as stories and hope. So maybe I could just back up a little bit with my journey to put perspective. It helps me kind of in my mind. But I grew up in the foster care system in New York. I was adopted out of Tioga County when I was 9 and then adopted into the state of New Jersey. So that was my exit out of New York. But prior to being adopted, I did grow up in 19 different foster homes. And this was a couple decades ago. Not that I'm going to tell anybody how many decades ago. And at that time, we didn't have internet. We didn't have a lot of those things to really track. So when we start looking at technology and things like that, that can bridge the gap a little bit. But really, back when I was growing up, pieces of information really did not get shared. And unfortunately, I think my brother and I got moved around a lot. We ended up in some homes. I mean, at one point, I was removed from a home for some physical abuse. My brother and I were separated. But I think along the way, one of the things, if I were to reflect on how did I get from such a painful point in my life that honestly impacted me for decades, I still have impact from these experiences. Um, but we'll say, for lack of a better word, like the angels that come through. And these angels can come through in a foster home. They can come through from a teacher, like right here. I'm just sitting, and as you ask, I have my adoption book, and this is something my adoptive mom put together for me. And here's a card from, and I don't know if you can see it, it's the cardinal, but it's from my teacher, my last teacher in foster, and when I was in foster care. And I can remember my teacher, right, seeing me and taking me to the circus. Like, we don't go to the circus in foster care, right? Like, who does that? But I did, and so that was like a significant relationship to me was this teacher, Mrs. Mathewson, right? And I love that my mom really worked hard, my adoptive mom, to say these things. There are, I think, things along the way, people who have been able to stay the storm with me when others really can't, because when you have a lot of grief and you are not very good at expressing yourself. And I do struggle with ADHD. It's very hard, to really express. So people, for example, like this teacher who can see, look, like, because in the classroom, I was the kid who's like running around, right? Like not paying attention. And she can kind of see beyond that, and she can kind of see that I am this child and that I need to be comforted, or maybe just something, so I'm something beyond a diagnosis and something beyond a behavior, so it's those individuals, those folks that I think if I look back, I can say, wow, like what an impact. Or how did I go from being at that point in my life, I'm a high school dropout, right? And most people are like, oh, really? Compared to where I'm at now and the work that I'm doing. And it's like, yes, because I didn't get to escape that like a lot of other foster children really, we didn't have. And honestly, I know some of the statistics are changing, but we still don't have the same access to education or to some of these things. And I know that people are trying, but it's still a fact. So our statistics are not so good. And I know that there's many people now paying attention and trying to work on that. But so I see that teacher as being supportive. Moving forward into my career, it would be being a high school dropout. I was enrolled in the Alon School, which is a whole nother controversial topic of its own. But for me, it saved my life. I was really at this place where the grief had really taken hold of me, that I was not futuristic. It didn't matter what people said to me. I didn't trust anybody. After being adopted, I went through like 19 placements. My grief was just that profound. And I couldn't trust people that were just diagnosing me. Alon didn't do that, and that wasn't their model. And I think that's part of the reason why. And to this day, I still have connections with folks, and that's like decades ago. And I think they helped me get re-enrolled back in school. And then from there, I went on for my undergrad. And doors, I think people just along the way encouraged me. I know when I applied to Boston College for my master's, they brought me in on academic probation. And it was after having an interview with Dr. Howard and him seeing something in me, because on paper, or that way, maybe people just didn't understand me. And that really opened up doors, you know. And I feel like I have not circled around in Boston College with all the work we've been doing lately, but I'm going to circle around to them. I think that, you know, this is a fine use of their education with what we're doing, you know, but they took a chance. And so it's those people that see us within this system, you know, and I would argue same to the caregivers, you know, like the work I've done, it's that people allow me into their experience or to what's going on, or to be a part of helping, not solving. You know what I mean? Not being the expert of someone's necessarily personal experience, but being asked to kind of join in. And so I try to model back what I know has worked for me and the people that reach out. And I think that's what I said to you, Steve. What I really enjoyed about meeting you is I've lived this my entire life. So it doesn't take long. And I think you and I talked about this, where you can kind of be like, okay, maybe I'm not saying something, but I'm going to call you out on that kind of a thing, because that's, you know, who we are. And you have to survive in this system. And it sounds dramatic, but you have to survive, because, you know, we're children. We start off as children who, through no fault of our own, truthfully, have gone through some horrific events. It's just, our system wants to help. I mean, you can hear it all around us, you know, Melania with her fostering the future, which is exciting. It's been drawing a lot of attention, you know, and getting some attention to foster care. And I told you, it brought me to tears, just being to this point in my life and being like, wow, we're going to talk about foster care. This is amazing. Even being here today, right? Like, that people would want to hear about this, but we should, because these are
Absolutely.
children. Sorry, I'm so passionate. But these
I
are
I love that about
children.
you. And you know what?
Yeah.
Going back to what you mentioned about being a child and nobody listening and nobody really hearing and paying attention to what's going on in the grief that's going on with these kids' lives that have been torn out of a home and then moved around and moved around and moved around. And we had talked about it. I had talked to you at one time about a story. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the air, about a teenager that came in here from Schenectady, and he'd been in 20 foster homes down in the Schenectady area, and there was nowhere else for him to go. So they brought him to Utica. I go to a full disclosure meeting, like an intake process, and they asked me if I would take this child into our home. And my wife and I just don't say no. So we went down there, and they gave me, they had him in the room where I first met him, but they also had probably 12, 15 inches of paperwork stacked on top of each other of all the things he had done wrong in all the other foster homes. And it was a pivotal moment in that kid, because this kid had been in trouble everywhere. Nobody had reached out and been that mentor or gave him a hand up. Nobody had listened and tried to figure out what was going on with him. But I remember pushing all them papers away and says, I don't want to read them. I don't want anything to do with that stuff. And I turned to the kid and I told him right out, I don't care what all is in here. I only care about what you do in my home. From this day one, you got a fresh start. And this kid and if my wife was standing right next to me, she would tell you, this teenager who was so rebellious and so much anger in him and inside grief that he couldn't show, he wanted to be tough to show because of survival mode. He never gave us an issue in several years that he was here. Winds up being a star halfback for our football team and going into the military and everything else. And if we don't take a chance on these kids and show them that we trust them and do things a little differently, the same old way of doing foster care doesn't work, in my opinion. We've been doing this a long time for me to be able to state that the systems are fragmented and broke. And until we get these kids at the table of so much of this stuff, I don't know if it gets fixed. And this is why it's so important that we have somebody like yourself on our show, and then you get a chance to speak out there about some of this stuff. Because I'll get into one more topic, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on is because you're so relatable to so many kids in my home that have come through our home. A lot of kids have come through here, and you're relatable because you were in their shoes. And even though I'm a foster parent, that part of it of being in strangers' homes, I'm not relatable to, and why your voice needs to be heard, and why these kids need to hear from you out there. And if we can do anything to get them a seat at the table and get their voices heard, then we can help
Absolutely.
move the needle.
Mhm. Yeah, that's exactly. I 100%. And I'm not here to talk about, on the business side of the house, but that's 100% what my work is about. I'm taking a seat at that table. It's like, if you can imagine me bringing my hands up and being like, come on, let's go. But it's all of us having a seat at this table. It's like me and you and I want to sit down and I want to have managed care at this table, right? And I want to have the teachers at this table. And I want to have, I know I'm hearing that social workers are a bad name, right? But I want to have more of us at the table, right? Because there are many of us that care. And I think these conversations, I see a lot of, it's that way, or it's this way, or, it's that. And it's like, I think it's a lot bigger than pointing fingers. And we have to just start with listening to the folks that have lived it. I am blown away by how many people, and I've learned over this journey, don't know what foster care is. And you assume like you don't know that this is happening, we were talking about the garbage bags. I was looking, and you can see now people are starting to address garbage bags, right? But I was moving my items around in garbage bags many decades ago, right? Like, this is something, but these are your children, dragging their items around in garbage bags after their sense of self is already becoming annihilated from things being fractured in the system and whatever experience they had. So I think we need to have those conversations together about, hey, let's talk about comfort. Let's talk about support. And how do we support the Steves of the world to support, the children, and vice versa? Because I do think too, I think a lot of times foster parents get a bad rap. You guys are like stuck, like, right, if we did like the management model, you're like middle management, like you're just smushed right in the middle where it's just not good, unfortunately, because it's like you're supposed to know all of this stuff. And, we need you, right, from the foster child perspective. And so, but things are just miscommunicated. So I can think of, I was quite the child, with my grief and then the system. So, I couldn't agree more. Like, our work is bringing people to the table. I want, and we talked about having more talks. Let's invite them to the table. I think you and I know a lot of different folks that would love to contribute. And I've met a lot of people, just nationwide, that are feeling safer. I don't know, safer is the word, but, for me as a clinician, it's safer for me now to say I was in foster care. Like, that was me. I didn't want to be discredited because of that.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that you are able to say that, because to be honest with you, the kids, when they're in foster care, they tell us right now, please don't tell my friends that I'm in foster care. They might be another ethnicity, but they still don't want me to tell them they're foster care. Please don't tell my girlfriend I'm in foster care. Please don't tell her parents I'm in foster care. And it tells you that there's still a stigma attached to that part of it, and why we need more caring people. And I'll go back to what you mentioned about the foster parents part of it. Look, it is a difficult job. My wife and I never got into this for us to get a stipend. at all. And we've proved that. Heck, we're still remodeling some parts of our house from rambunctious kids that were here that, and when they came here, they broke stuff. And we're still repairing some of the things
I'd have been
with
one of
that stuff.
those kids. Yeah, I was like one of them. Like, I'd have been costing you, buddy. Like,
And we just never
right.
have. And but unfortunately, even in any profession and as in any part of society, there's good foster parents and there's also foster parents that aren't
Mhm.
good. And there's along the way here, there's foster parents we wouldn't send our own kids to in this area, because they had gone there maybe once for a respite and it was an absolute disaster.
Right.
And we're always about those teaching moments. And you had mentioned somebody that cared about the child. We're all about that. We don't want it undone on a weekend or undone with a 2 week maybe respite because we're gone. And and they happen to be in a respite situation, and uh, because everybody has their own thing. But it tells you that there's not any uniformity in the foster care system because there's so many differences in every foster placement, in every foster home. You never know what you're going to get. And the kids have told me that
Yep.
specifically. And a lot of times they even act out just to get out of that environment. Yet
Yep.
you would think the foster care agency or the county would say, gee, I wonder why this kid's acting out. Maybe we ought to ask him, but they don't ask the child. They just see he's acting out. And what it was they didn't, the placement was worse than maybe the original abuse going on in the bio homes. And it's just unfortunate. I think it's all the more reason why we need to listen
Yeah.
to you and listen to others that are in this, and listen to those people that want to help and care. I have foster parent friends right now that I would send my own kids and their kids to stay there. That's how good they are, how much they really truly care, who want to get you to a better place coming in and make you successful in life. And unfortunately, like I think a lot of times they're the ones that are discounted. I probably is the word I would probably use. And their voices aren't heard either. And we have asked our foster care agency and our county for sit downs about trying to change some of these things that we see that
Yeah.
kids are telling us needs to be changed. Not just us, the kids. Silence, not even responding to emails. And because I think they get into a certain position and it becomes a business, and it gets less and less of farther apart from that these are children and who need love and support. And so I don't know if you have anything to add to that part of it.
No, I was thinking about what you were saying, and I started thinking about my records, like when it was time for me to go back and kind of be able to get some of my identity or who I am. And at that time in New York, you had to pay. You had to pay for your records to get your records, and then you don't really get records, and you don't get this information. But yet, all these decisions are made about you, and you don't really have a voice in that, and everybody's speaking on your behalf, and I have been that person where everybody was speaking on my behalf, and then I've been that person, as the clinician where people are like, Beth, what do you think? What's going on with them? That kind of a thing. And yeah, I think pulling us together, all of us, having these honest discussions, reimagining the way that we're doing things, because I think right now, the way the system is set up, it's not set up to address what we probably should be focusing on a little bit more, which is kind of that continuity, and how we
Right.
understand people, and who these kids are in touch with and what matters, and not necessarily how do we address this administrative task or this, how do we address, you know what I mean? And a lot, and we hear from so many people, like, and I felt it myself, like, what is up with the paperwork? I used to work in insurance and managed care, and, I used to review for privatized foster care, and it's like, so I just think, yeah,
Yeah.
we
Look,
need to have these discussions.
absolutely, Beth. We have to be better. We have to do better. The bottom line is, and there's so many of the agencies that are out there, and a lot of their mission statements say we're changing children's lives. We're doing this. We're doing that. Unfortunately, if that was true,
Yeah.
then a simple federal statute that says kids are supposed to stay in foster care from 15 to 22 months, that would be adhered to. It's not. We've had kids 10, 12, 14 years in foster care
Yeah.
in and out of our homes. It tells me that the system is broke, and I'm not interested anymore in trying to push this under the rug and say, well, there's a lot of excuses why they're in care for 15, they're over 15 to 22 months. It's not acceptable.
You were talking earlier with your son before you adopted him, where they're like, look, you're going to come home. You're going to come home in so many days. Well, I don't want to disclose any who or, but, somebody I know as a foster parent was in this situation, right? Where, one moment, something's supposed to be happening and the child's told one thing. And then the next moment, they're like, just kidding. You're not going to be, your parental rights, whatever, is not going to be terminated. You're going to be going home. And you're just like, wow, how do we responsibly handle a family or such sensitive issues? And how do we have such a rapid change in like 3 days, 4 days, 2 days? And for people within the system, I know many of you are going, yep, she's right. That happens. For those of you who don't know, that happens. And these are children. These are not hamburgers. We are not commodities. We are not, and the families, we look at the foster parent crisis, right? Everybody's talking about it, right? It's hard to constantly be doing this when you don't, the misalignment, right?
Yeah. We're here at Finding Common Ground, and we've had a lot of conversations, and I'm sure you know that I'm very solution-based, Beth. So maybe the last part of our show here, I would like to talk a little bit about that. What I would love to do, and we've talked briefly about it, is the fact that because you are the perfect person to be relatable to the children that I want to continue to help outside of because my wife and I gave up our foster care on December 31st after many decades of doing it. And my advocacy now is geared towards trying to fix this system with some solutions that help these children so they're not staying in care 10, 12, 14 years. So I would love to propose you maybe helping with some of that with some projects. One of them being maybe help me co-host some podcasts specifically related to the foster care world in every aspect, whether it's interviewing foster parents, interviewing foster kids, interviewing foster staff that might be in a provider agency. I know there is a code of silence sometimes with some of this. A lot of people are afraid to speak up until they're out of the system. But I know there's people that have reached out to me that would love to come on the show, and I'd love
And we
to
got that.
have you there.
We've got that, because you know what? I would say too, for a while, it was I didn't really come out about my own story. It's been more private. But I think realizing that I can tell my stories for a purpose, or that other people can realize, look, like I am amazed at how much I realized people didn't understand about what goes on. It's not like, hey, you're in the system and everybody's taking care of you. And it's not that we go into the system and people don't want to take care of us. It's not like it's some big evil. There are acts along the way,
Right.
But no, I mean, that's really not, I think, the experience there. And I know what my work is and what we're doing at Anchor Phoenix is we are pulling together those voices to create better solutions. We do have an AI spin on what we're doing, but it really is to address this. And this is my mission, to pull together voices, but it's from everybody, because that's how we're going to move forward. Is
Absolutely.
hearing it for what it is. And I think also educating the public, right? Like, wait a minute. Like, yeah, I was adopted when I was 9. Okay. But hear me, I didn't live happily ever after. In fact, I was like outrageous. Like, my grief was so insane at that point. I mean, my adopted parents, they were not even remotely prepared to handle what they adopted. And I mean, we talk about, I think I showed you this is my little foster care mugshot,
Yeah.
but I was chosen out of a book. So how do you better align, like the needs of like what I would have in parents, and we need a little bit more than love, right? So getting these conversations, getting people to come out, understanding what we're doing, like I said, I've met some amazing people. I think you know some amazing people. And then I would love to hear too, I think more foster youth, but not because the expectation is that they are the ones that have to fix the system, because
Right.
they don't. They
Right.
don't have to fix this. They, you know what? For a couple decades, I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to resonate in this, right? I've marinated in foster care enough. It's just post-Harvard situation being like, okay, fine. Now I'm responsible. Like, right. Like I need to help advocate. And that's a different, and like you and your wife, saying, okay, now's the time. Now's the time to advocate. Definitely. I definitely would love to host that platform with you and to really open that up and to open it up to all different stories, whether it's like stories like Rachel's, right? Like it's not just the foster care youth. It's not just the foster parents. It's all of us. And
Yeah.
that's how I see it. I can think of children that I have worked with as a clinician, and I really care about the people that I work with. They'll tell you that if they wanted to out themselves, right? Like, but sometimes it gets cut off, and so we don't get to know what happens.
Right.
It's a hard system.
Yeah. I remember asking Rachel to co-host, and she thought I was crazy. She said, "Who wants to hear my story?" And you know what happened was, her story was heard by more people than anybody that we possibly could have imagined.
Yeah.
Because her story's not told. My daughter involved in foster care, who would come home and from school or something, and there's new kids on the couch, and the little kids would ask my daughter, "Are you the new kid?" And so it's pretty telling. And to have her do it from her own words, I didn't coach her. I still haven't listened to the whole podcast part of it with her. But
It was good.
those kinds of stories need to be
Yeah.
told, and all the different angles, like you mentioned. What I would like to do is do a separate maybe podcast for your business part of it, the Anchor Phoenix part of it, and what you're trying to do to help with that. I'd love to do something dedicated to that. We can certainly put your links in this particular one if you'd like. And
We just clarify too that we are a nonprofit. So I just
yes,
really want to throw that out there. Like, hands up. We're not on a money train. There's no money grab. Like, this
I'm
is,
glad you said that because that's
yeah, like
important.
legit. And like I told you, New York is very close to my heart. You know what I mean? It would be an honor to be a part of the solutioning, and just start being discussions, to bring things full circle. But I would love that. And I think that amplifying the voices, Anchor Phoenix, we're here to create that space. We would honor that with UST. We would honor that with foster youth and others in the system. So, I know, like I said, some people see the word social worker. They're like, you're the person who made those decisions. Maybe some others did, but I'm not that person, number one.
Right.
And number two, there are many of us that very much care and worry, and it's the same with the state appointed guardians, believe it or not, right? Like I know people that have done that role. So this is a very hard system. And we
Absolutely.
really need to make some fundamental changes. And then my other word will be continuity.
Right. Yeah, and that's what the kids need. Look, the kids don't need to be in 19, 20 different foster homes. We need good parents. We need foster parents. We need a good system around them. I do want to take this time to thank those who gave you a hand up, those that just said, you know what, I see something in Beth. And those are the ones that need the accolades, because they probably are completely responsible, and plus your own ambition is in getting out of a system that was not set up for you, and that you had no say in, and more importantly that you found a way out of that part of it, and to build a life and be successful. And those are the stories I'd love to be able to also tell too, that you can make it out. We've had kids here that are doing really well, that have aged out. Those stories need to be told. And if we can do anything, like I said, together, I would love to be able to
Yes.
find a way.
Because now I want back in. Now I want
Right.
back in. I'm like, hey,
Right.
like New York, you hear me? We'll start there.
Right.
Or throwing that out there. I have a moment? Can I
Yeah,
just say,
absolutely.
when you said how else did I get here? How did I go from being this child growing up in the system and working the system and what brings me here today and the people that have been behind me. So a really big part of my story too, really, I took this Harvard executive education class on AI and some healthcare solutioning, and my capstone had gotten some attention. And I will say that yet is another amazing pocket. And I know you have started to meet some of them as well. I mean, they're quite, with Sani and stuff, but that has really like having that opportunity under Professor Beam and getting this opportunity to speak and to have been heard on that platform for foster youth, and the amazing supports from many of the cohorts that had been in that class, has been amazing, and the class that came after. So there's a lot of support, or like those angels. We have volunteers here at Anchor Phoenix that I'm like, amazingly grateful for it, that it is to do just this. Let's amplify these voices. Let's seek some solutions. Let's do it together. It's an ugly story, right, of what happens in foster care, but there is beauty in this story. So it's not an all or nothing, but I think it's understanding, number one, we are looking at a profound layers of grief.
Yeah. We, as we've talked about the garbage bag thing. Most of the kids that have come through our home though they've been in many other foster homes, are still carrying those garbage bags around.
Oh, yeah, they are still today.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, I know in New York here where they're trying to throw luggage at it, but I want to do more than that, Beth. The luggage isn't enough. We have to do more to help this whole foster care system, and especially the children that are inside it. And even, to be honest with you, some of the ones that are outside of it, because they've come back to our home too, lost, homeless, and everything else years later.
You don't have a place to store that suitcase anymore. That's half the problem. I thought about the suitcase thing too, because I really appreciate that there are people that are like, hey, let's go in and address that problem. I think that addresses the problem at that surface level. If you don't understand what really goes on in the system, and that maybe those suitcases, so the reality is those suitcases may be gifted to those children, but they may not leave with them, because often our things get left behind. And so it's a nice gesture. But we have to go beyond that, because we need more help than suitcases. You know what? Between you and I, Steve, we could probably generate enough attention. We could do some like crazy suitcase fundraising event. We'd probably be fantastic at it. I'm pretty convinced, because we're pretty passionate people, but we need more than that.
Absolutely.
So if instead, you could donate luggage, or maybe you could donate 5 hours of your business time to try to help solution something for autism or these foster youth, or maybe you're a physician and you work with a lot of them and you could donate some time, or maybe you are the sibling, right, who grew up in that home and you're like, hey, I've got this view here that you need to hear, because it's a systems that, right, like it's all of us, we all interact. We're not like this isolated siloed thing like our child welfare system is, unfortunately. It's just not designed. But with AI, which I'm passionate about, we do have some tools and some other ways that I think we can reimagine, to help.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing that. And like I said, we'll do another podcast with you with that. And in closing, any final comments in closing, or?
I'm just so grateful that you asked me. True disclosure, first podcast. Hopefully I passed. But it's been great too with the studio and stuff. So I appreciate you asking, and I look forward hopefully to hearing from some folks that maybe heard us today. I'm very approachable, as you know. I'm usually on the flip side of my tech. I'm reachable, and I will always welcome a conversation from any angle. And even if you don't agree with me, I'll welcome that too. I'd like a good challenge.
Yeah, I know my daughter wants to talk to you, so.
Absolutely, but I told you respectfully, I just wanted to see, our children are.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. We're closing up here, and we will, like I said, put your links out here. This is Finding Common Ground. Stay tuned. We have a website, fcgadvocacy.org. this podcast will wind up on eventually, and some other projects that are solution-based that we're working on. So until next time, thank you.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.